to the County Pulse podcast. And with me today, of course, is Jordan Amaskin from Prep Red Zone, Illinois. And we're going to be talking a little bit about our continued dialogue that we have with recruiting. And we think last week we've heard some feedback that we kind of piqued people's interest. So we've piqued your interest on recruiting if you're watching this, or we've now started to convert it over and also do audio, which is helpful for folks that are either on the road, who are, working but can listen to music, stuff like that, catch it here and there, working around the house, working in the yard. So you can, I know it's hard to sit here and watch us as good looking as we are, right, Jordan? To watch us and then also be able to do the things you need to do. So that's why we kind of plug that in as well. And so we're pleased with that. But I think we're going to talk a little bit about not just, what's piquing your interest, but kind of taking this, and Jordan, you can talk about this, kind of the different stages we need to go through. And I think we're talking about starting at the very basic stuff, right? And then going from there. And so we've got a little bit of a kind of a slideshow we're going to go through as me and Jordan are talking. But Jordan, talk a little bit about why we're going to go through this, why you think from a scout's perspective, this is going to be important to really get down to the basics. I know there's probably a lot of folks who are watching us who say, I don't need that. I already know this stuff. But I'll be honest with you, and I think Jordan, you would agree with this. There are a lot of folks out there, both parents and players, who really don't have a clue on the basics of this. And so let's talk a little bit before we jump into the slideshow, kind of your perspective of what you think the important parts are and why that's important if you're wanting to get some looks from colleges.
Yeah. So, the two biggest things that jump to my mind is kind of not necessarily the basic things, but that everyone should be doing. Well, if they aren't, they should absolutely be doing it, is having a Twitter profile set up the correct way that has, our information in it that we're going to dive into later, and always filling out the recruitment questionnaires on each college level's website. So it's very simple. It's free. Probably takes maybe 5-10 minutes or so. You just have to search up whatever school it is that you might want to go to, or you're interested in, or interested in you. Go onto their football page, go into the recruitment questionnaire form, and you just put in your basic information, your first name, your last name, height, weight, GPA, contact information. You can link your highlights into it, and then you just click submit. So then your name is in their database. So once they go through the database and watch your film, if you're a player that they want, they can contact you that way. Or if maybe you might not fit their program, but they know that you deserve to be playing at this level, they'll talk to their other coaches at the same level to be like, hey, this kid can really play. Maybe he will be a fit for your program, and just start building, being into those different databases, being able to get your name out there. So you end up having more offers on the table, more college interest, instead of having to only pick between maybe one or two schools. You'll pick between maybe 10 or 15 because you've done the repetitive work of getting your name out there.
But I think it's important that we talk a little bit about these basics, right? These basics of why you need to do these things, because even if you think you may not be recruited, right? And I'm sure there's kids out there go, I'll never play in college. One thing that I think is important to know is that kids, when they're playing, a lot of times coaches, and we talked about this the other day with some of the players, they're looking at you for what you do now, but they're also looking at your potential. So, for example, when we met with a group of young players here at my house on Saturday, one of them is a sophomore, going to be a junior, right? So he's finished up a sophomore year. He's 6'4", 320. Now, he's still growing, so he could be, by the time he's a junior, senior, could be 6'5", 6'6". He's probably going to thin out a little bit. But from a coach's standpoint of view, he's going to look at that kid and say, man, I could use him on the line. Or if he really thins out, he could use him as a tight end. but he can use them on the offense, the defense, maybe as a tight end, in particular, blocking tight end, depending on how his feet are. And I'm not just saying you've got to be big, but one thing that you can't teach is size and height. That's one thing that is a disadvantage. Now, talking about that doesn't mean that, if you're 6 foot and 195 pounds, that you're not going to be picked up. But you have the advantages the big guys don't. You can move, you're quicker, right? You've got the ability to play multiple back positions, either in defense or offense. And so you've got more agility and mobility than probably the big guys do. And so I don't want players who out there thinking, I can never do that. I'll never play at college. I think if you're out there doing what you've got to do, and this has been confirmed by a lot of scouts from guys I know, right, all the way up to the guys that are some of the best in the country, that you have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. That's a given. But if you're able to go out there and do your best, there's probably a school for you.
Yep.
It may be at a JUCO level, maybe at an NAI level, maybe D3, maybe D2, maybe even D1. Depending on what you put into it, and it's not just an on or in season, on the field type of training. It's also an off season, off the field. What am I doing? Am I hitting the gym? Am I lifting? Am I doing the things that I need to do? What do I see? Kind of going, and we're going to get into this about the May 15th Prep Red Zone showcase back on May 15th that we went to. You're going to have measurables, right? So you're going to look at that and you're going to say, well, we can do this. We've got my 40 is a little slow, right? So maybe I've got to start working on my glutes and different things like that. My lats, try to get those things stronger. I've got to learn to run more on the ball of my feet. You're not as quick laterally. So what do I've got to do to be able to increase that? You can increase those things as you're going along and doing that in the off season. So I don't want players nor parents to think, well, my kid can't do that. I think your kid can, but there's a lot of work that they have to do. Now, putting that aside, the physical issue of it, the discussion of the basics, I think, is going to be really important when we get into it. And I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind, Jordan. And if you want to talk about this, you can do this. Maybe I'll take one slide, you take one slide, right? Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about some of the do's and don'ts that we have of recruiting, and in particular at the basics of profiles and huddle tapes.
Yeah.
So as we go through here and we look at the Twitter profiles, do's and don'ts, it's really a chance for you to maximize your chances of a college coach getting your information. Now, why did we design it like that? We're not going to say maximize your chance that you're going to play in college. We can't say that. Not that there's anything that binds us from saying that, but we don't say that because you can never predict what a college coach is going to do. So we want to make sure they get the information. If you've done and given them the proper information, and you're doing the right things on the field and in particular off the field in the off seasons, and you're increasing your measurables, you've increased your chances also, not just getting the information out to the coach, but that they're going to say, I think you'd be a good fit for my program.
Yep.
So, Jordan, I'm going to talk about this one here. This one is called, or you can talk about this one, but I want to introduce it. It's the Good Luck Finding Me profile. Okay.
Yeah. So, the Good Luck Finding Me profile, it doesn't really have where they go to high school, doesn't have what position, the person plays, it has, their class, the year that they're going to graduate. But other than that, you don't really have any of the other information that is important, especially for a college coach to know. So then they'll be able to know what position you play, kind of where they see you fitting into their program. Just things of that nature that, like even myself, at first glance at this, you have to do more digging to find that information. And for college coaches that have, hundreds upon hundreds of athletes that send in the film or, want to get scouted by a school, they might just overlook this player because they don't have the time necessarily to look for that information.
I apologize for that. I skipped forward a little bit on that, a little too soon, but those basics in that profile are missing, right? As Jordan mentioned, which is your high school, right? They need to know your high school, not just need to know your high school, but for example, if you put, MHS for Manteno High School, you put uh, LFHS for Lake Forest High School, right? Nobody knows that. Like nobody knows what BBCHS is.
Yeah.
You need to spell that out, right? So you have to have your high school in there so they can look. Then you've got to get through and you've got to get your measurables in. Are you a quarterback who's 6'5" and 220, or are you a quarterback that's 5'9" and 195?
Yep.
That's something that they need as well. So those important things have to be in your profile to be able to do that. And then this is the next one. It's kind of a step up from this. And again, I think you can talk about this, Jordan. This is a little better. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So, I mean, you have, the class that they graduate. Says they're an athlete, so they know that they play multiple positions, but you don't know what those positions are. Another good thing is they have their 40 time in running a 4.4440, which is very good to have in there and very hard to do. So that's a positive on this profile. The only thing is knowing to put onto it is saying what high school they go to, because it just says high school in there. And then also, spelling out what positions that they play instead of just putting athlete, maybe put those positions first and then put athlete at the end. So then, the college scout can know these are the positions that he plays, and this is what makes him an athlete.
Yeah, and I think, again, these are my personal preferences. I think that, obviously having your positions and your height and weight is going to be important, right? I'm trying to think as a college coach. So again, this is my personal preference. Players, you can do whatever you want to do. Parents, your kids can do this if they want. My position is dump the icons and emojis. I think it clutters it up a little bit, right? I get that they're an athlete and they play football. I understand what the football is. I think I understand what the awards thing is. I get that. I guess. I assume he's a track runner or he's fast because he's got a little guy in there. But really dump those and put that into your thing. Say, hey, I go to such and such a high school. I'm 2023. I'm 6'3", 210. And I play, wide receiver, defensive back, let's say. And then, of course, put in, like you said, Jordan, put in that 40 if you've got great times. If your 40 is 6.3, I probably wouldn't put that in, right? So I would stay out of that a little bit and get into the positives, right? So there's some kids, this kid may be maybe a fast kid, right? But he may not be strong, as strong as he would like to be, or maybe coach would. So maybe you leave that out. So, it's not a hard thing to do, but we're going to look here in a minute about guys that I know, players that I know that I've worked with that have cleaned up their profiles really, really well. So this one here is the easy for coaches to know who you are profile. And that's what you want. That's what you want. Can they get information? Do they know who you are? Can they get what they need to get? Remember, I'm a college coach. If I'm looking and I'm looking at your profile, I've got 200 kids, other kids from different positions, or maybe I'm a defensive lineman and I've got 75 kids I got to go through. I need to know, one, who you are, where you go to school, certainly what year you are. I think what year you are is probably the most important, because if he's looking, you may have all the attributes for him, but you may be a 2023 and he needs a 2022. That makes a big difference, right? So as we go into these profiles, and Jordan, of course, me and you can talk about it. We know these kids. I really know them. They're Bradley kids, but these are both of these kids. Both as you look at the profile, on the left, Nate Murphy, is a kid who's very responsive to suggestions. In fact, he just put his up, and before we even got it up, I was sending him something, and I'd already worked with Cage Williams from Bradley, and gave him an insight. So while I'm typing out my message to Nate, Cage already sent him everything. So by the time I got done typing, put this in, think about this, get a picture, right? Cage had already talked to him about that. And that's the great thing about working with your teammates there. But and then, of course, Grayson is a player. Obviously, I know he's my son, but all these are important. And I think it's going to be something to see. These are great profiles. They're not great because we know them. They're not great because they go to Bradley Bourbonnais High School. They're just putting in the right information. And I could have picked out probably 20 other ones. I just don't have 20 other ones. And these are guys that we had at the house. We had about, what'd you say, Jordan, 15 Saturday, something like that?
Oh, yeah, around there.
Yeah, around 12 to 15. And so I thought it was important that we went ahead and acknowledge those guys. And we actually went through this with them. So talk a little bit about this one, and I'll kind of go over so people can see where we're at.
Yeah, so, the important thing is having your name showing up in the beginning, yeah, the one that you're circling, having your full name there, give your first or last name, completely fine. And then going into the bio, you have, your height, your weight, you have the positions that you play, you have your high school spelled out completely, the class that you're a part of. And not only that, you have your huddle profile linked into your bio, right? Which is going to be a big thing. So if you're a college coach and you find this profile and you see that their highlights are right there in your bio, you can just click on it and easily get to that film. And not only that, you also have their latest highlights on their pinned tweet, which will be the first tweet that comes up on their profile. So if you need to see their latest highlights, you can also find it there.
Yeah, I think that's important. And we talked about that, right? Saturday was, kind of laying us out. So you look at Nate, I've highlighted his name, then I've highlighted the high school, right? And that's completely spelled out. Look at Cage, I highlighted, his height and his weight. We have that 3 and 4 here. And then the year, right? What class is he? Those are really important things. Getting into Grayson, Grayson's got his. Grayson is a kid, and I know there's other kids out there do that. He's a player that, because of the needs of the team, they've had to move him around. So he started out at defensive end, tight end. Then they said, we want you to go to offensive tackle this year because we need you. And then he also then played some defensive tackle. So you have to, I think you put those in, it shows flexibility. But then I think with a lot of these kids, if you're playing multiple positions or you're doing multiple sports, right? That's another thing that we didn't really talk about. But we should, is put down an athlete. I like seeing, and coaches like seeing this, that you're a 3-sport athlete, right? And you can talk about this, right, Jordan? You can talk about the issue of coaches that for some reason, and I think I know why, you probably do too, they like wrestlers, right? Wrestlers are good football players.
Yep.
And I don't know if you want to talk about that or you want me to talk about why that is important. I'm not encouraging anybody. That's not my job to say your son should play football. But I was half tempted to try to get Grayson into or play wrestling or do wrestling. I was half tempted to put Grayson into wrestling because, one, I'd like to see him toughen up a little bit, and two, just the things that it teaches you. So do you ever hear that feedback about what football coaches think of wrestlers?
Yeah. So, the most important thing, is basically 2 things. 1, the conditioning and toughness that it builds for the player. And then 2, being able to have that low center of gravity, which is what transitions into football the best. Because in wrestling, the lower man's going to win 9 times out of 10. When you have to, try and shoot the legs and do all, things of the nature, the different moves of winning wrestling matches is all about having that low center of gravity. And from having low center of gravity, it also increases, your mobility, your flexibility, your, increasing your hip flexors, your hip mobility, just things of that nature that might be overlooked by most people. But transitioning into football, it ends up being able to get under your opponent's pads and drive them back, or being able to get a little under the defensive back and be able to beat the press, right? Using your fast feet and being able to stack the defender and win the deep route. If you're a quarterback, being able to maybe get the ball off under pressure when there's a guy that's trying to throw you to the floor. For offensive linemen, being able to just drive your defender back. For defensive line, being able to just completely drive back the offensive lineman. Linebackers, just being aggressive and attacking. It goes for all positions, not just the big guys up front. So that's kind of a big thing of what I hear about why coaches like having their players wrestle. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, and we talked about a little bit. We had a wrestler that was at the house. That's a football player. These are guys we met with. We fed them. We'll do that for so long, but hopefully I don't get 90 people showing up. I'm going to be in trouble because only about 12 or 15 ate through almost. I think we fix 4 to 5 racks of ribs, and I was lucky enough that my wife said, "Sure, go ahead and do it." But if I started saying I need to cook a whole hog, a couple whole hogs, or 25 racks of ribs or whatever, plus where will we put them in the house? I don't know. But one of the kids that was there, who was a wrestler, said, I was talking to him, so well, why do you think wrestlers make good football players? He said, well, in wrestling, we're always anticipating a couple steps ahead of what your opponent's going to do on the mat. And I thought that was really important to do that. And he talked about the leverage, right? How do you leverage somebody? That's such a key component for football too, is thinking, you're a defensive guy. Let's just use this as an example. You see the quarterback up, you study the film, you start thinking, you're thinking, okay, if this guy moves here, this guy goes here. I've seen this play. I know where they're going to go, right? Or if this guy's coming at me, what do I need to do to get around him to get to the quarterback or to the running back? Those are such key components there that I think are beneficial. Again, and I've talked to wrestlers and I've talked to wrestlers who are football players. And wrestlers say this, and I don't doubt it in any way, shape, or form. I haven't had wrestlers. I wasn't a wrestler. But going through wrestling and practices, when you go, it's so difficult that when you go to other sports, and with all due respect to the coaches, Coach Cole, your coach at your guys' coach at Piatone, wherever it may be, right? Coach Hart at Kankakee. With all due respect to you guys, and I believe this to be honestly true, he said going to other practices is more like a picnic. Now, I'm not asking you coaches then to run them in the ground. That's not what I'm asking. But what I am asking is that parents and players think about that as a component as they get into that. Again, 2 different sports. They may not want to, but it's advantageous for the players. So I think that's a big deal for wrestlers. And if wrestlers aren't playing football, that's something I think probably is an easy transition. It's probably easier, don't you think, Jordan, from going from wrestling to football, maybe than football to wrestling?
Yeah, because we're already used to doing the extreme conditioning that wrestling requires, and also cutting weight, which is a very difficult thing to do, especially for high school athletes, from freshmen up to seniors, and then transitioning into football or maybe even any other sport, of not having to do all of the wrestling requirements since they're so high, would be an easier transition going that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that those are really good components that people can have. Again, my son didn't do that. I'd love to get him in, even if it was after football, to prepare him if he's going to go on to play college somewhere, is to toughen him up, but also learn some of those tricks of the trades, even though he'd only have a year at. A couple of things I wanted to talk about too, for the players and the parents, is if you're doing a huddle video. Now, I think the vast majority of high schools have huddle. I think some of them do. Most of them do varsity sophomore. Some of them even do freshmen, okay, which is great, because I think freshmen aren't too early to start this process. But there's some do's and don'ts in huddle. And if you're not familiar with huddle as a parent, or maybe even a player, but probably more as a parent, it's important that you understand that Huddle is a service that's provided to schools. They pay for it. They have people that at school, coaches and different folks that will videotape it, one from the sideline, one from the end zone. I don't know how they do it at Huddle. I have an idea, but they upload that film and then they break it all down, every single play. So it jumps from play to play to play, and it cuts out all that middle point. So if you've ever watched like the NFL channel or games where they went back from the previous week or previous 2 weeks, you can watch a game in like no time because they cut that out. They just play, play, play. That's what Huddle does. And then the great thing is coaches use that to evaluate, like, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? And also then to use that film that they can get. It used to be that you would send VHS tapes, CDs. Now you share your Huddle with the team. So your coach, your high school coach gets that and then sends that out to the players. And then they'll go through, this is the opponent coming up this week. This is what we're looking at. This is what we typically see. Watch this, be aware of this. This is studying plays. And if you know any good NFL player or watched any good NFL player, you will see them studying tape over and over and over. What I call tape, it's called film now, or highlights, but they'll see that. But beyond that, right, from an internal perspective, externally, the athlete then can go through and watch his game, and he can pull out, and I'm not going to kid you, there are gals that are playing football. We had one over at Bishop Max, so I don't mean to forget about the gals. They're not quite as prevalent as the boys, but a player, right? Let's just say a player can go through that, watch it, and then say, man, that was a really good play. You're running back, scored a 40-yard touchdown. That's a play you want. You're a lineman. You drive a guy off 5 yards and you pancake him. 10 yards, you knock him out of bounds, right? You're down the field and you got a back behind you. You push him out of the way. You get an interception as a linebacker or D-back, whatever it may be. You grab those plays and you put together a highlight for that week. And what we've done is each week we've sent that via typically direct messages to colleges that and universities have shown interest to our player. But then at the end of the year, what you do is when you wrap up, that's in particular your junior year is super important for colleges. They want to see, what did you do in your junior year? Sophomore's okay, but there's such a change in sophomore and varsity ball, and there's the physical change from a sophomore to a junior to a senior. Yeah. They are interested in doing that, but you got to be careful on the things you do. And Jordan, when I get into this Huddle film, I want you to talk, at least in the first one, talk a little bit about the things you see as a scout that are problematic. It's a short clip, but I think it's important that we go ahead and show this.
Yeah. Yeah, so the initial thing is that before the ball is even snapped, you don't highlight where you're at on the field. So, like, for me watching it, I mean, even for others watching it, you have no idea who you're supposed to watch because nobody's highlighted at all. Now, a tip to do is that before the play starts is to always highlight where you're at on the field. So then a coach is able to know where to look specifically before the play even starts. Now, there are, athletes that will, want to maybe highlight themselves after the ball is snapped. And me personally and other, fellow, scouts and college coaches don't really like that. We kind of want to know where you're at before the ball snapped. So then we can see, your get off the ball, if you're fast, if you're slow, if you're a defensive lineman, like how you use your hands at the point of attack, if you use them or if you just completely bull rush, just the small details like that you might not think about, but for scouts and college scouts specifically, they want to know and they want to look at that, and having to rewind the tape is something that's going to take maybe a bunch of their time if they have to do that over, hundreds and hundreds of film to get through. Another thing is this is only maybe a 10-second clip or so, Jeff, do you think? And yeah, so what you want to know is Are there more highlights, right? Is this just maybe one clip from a game, or do you have maybe 3, 4, 5 more clips that you can make a season highlight tape? And even if it's only a minute or a minute and a half, that's still better than one 10-minute and 10-second clip, you know?
Yeah, and so in this case, for folks that are watching, this is a offensive player in the white. He's the lineman. I know he's a lineman because I know the kid, but I don't know which kid it is, right? So I can't tell who's doing what. I can't tell if he had a great play. My eyes will naturally go to the running back because he's got the ball. That's where typically people look. If you're a lineman, it's even that much more important that you do that. Now, I also know that this is the only clip that they've got besides another game clip, one clip. So your question is this the best you've got, right? Is this the only clip that you have out of, some high school games go 100, 140 plays, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're on the field let's say you're on the field half of that, just split it down the middle between offense and defense.
Yeah.
Are you saying out of the, 50 to 70 plays, you've only got one clip out of that? I would find that hard to believe. The other thing is when you're doing, and there's nothing wrong with doing weekly highlights, right? You
Yeah.
can do weekly highlights and be able to say, this is my week 1 highlight against such and such school. But you'll need to have some other highlights there
Yeah.
because you can't, one highlight is going to get it. The other thing is a coach will watch your season 1 highlights. They're typically really interested in your overall season highlights. But if you want to keep them updated, hey, coach, if you got time, or hey, coaches, right, you send it out and say, I've got this up. This is my week 2 highlight or whatever. They may look at that. They're not going to go through that one clip, nor are they going to go into the huddle page, look at the huddle page and go, oh, here's a highlight, here's a highlight, here's a highlight, here's a highlight. Here, they're not going to do that. Remember, what's at his door? At his door is, 50, 70, 100, 200 other athletes that he's got to look at. So when you combine that, and let's walk back to your profile, because Twitter is kind of the main conduit, right, between coaches right now and players. That's what they use. I'm not saying you can't reach out via email or phone or whatever, but this gets them easy access to be able to peek in and look. But if they look at your profile, they can't find you. But let's say he says, I think I've heard a lot about it. Let me see what I can find. Then they finally get to your huddle page. They find that, and then they see one highlight. He's going to move on just for the simple fact is there's another kid that is outside that door he hasn't got to, right? Outside the review door. And I'm just using that, just as metaphorically.
Yep.
Now he's going to go on to that kid and go, well, this kid is good. And you know what? He's got all the information. And, man, look at his highlights. And this kid doesn't have a full season. Now, I don't know if he didn't play that much. I think he did. But it's either I don't understand the huddle process or I may be just a little too lazy. Whatever it is, it's not acceptable. I don't care. Jordan, I imagine you probably don't care. But I know someone who will, and that's college coaches. And why is this important? Again, you have to think about this process. Your parents want you to go to school, right? Again, I think you can go to school. You can go to a trades program too. I'm a full believer. I'm a trades guy. I came out of the Teamsters, so I believe in that. But if you're going to go to school, mom and dad want you to go to school, and you say, I want to play football, it'd be nice if they paid something, right? If they gave you some money off, because nobody's got, at least nobody I know, and Jordan, I don't think there's anyone that's just, money's falling out of their pocket and they're just throwing it all over. You want to have the opportunity to say, hey, maybe I'm going to school at $60,000. Maybe I only pay $10,000. Maybe I pay nothing. I don't know. But you're not going to get any financial help athletically as it relates to your huddle and stuff. And we'll get into this in the next show about the different divisions, right? D3 up to, or JUCO up to D1, and try to kind of educate people on that. But do your homework here, right? Get it done. And I don't know that this particular example is getting it done. Now I'm going to bring up another kid. I'm not here to try to I'm not here to break anybody's bananas or anything like that. That's not my goal. I just happen to see this particular huddle highlight. I think there's some good plays in there, but there's some problems. And I'm going to be reaching out to this individual and say, here's what I think you need to do. I've done that 9 times out of 10. Kids take that advice. It's just advice. It's, and I'm not the smartest guy, and Jordan, you're not the smartest guy either. But I think we have some insight, and I'll reach out to him and say, here's what I think you need to do with this highlight. But there's some problems there, and we're going to get into that in a minute, and we're going to start watching this here now, and kind of talk. If you want to talk to her, we both can talk about it.
Yeah, so, off of this first clip, the big thing is that, one, the play goes on so, like, how would you say, maybe like 10 seconds before the ball's even snapped, around there?
Yeah, I was going to try to go back to that and see what I got here. So let's follow through this, right? Let's see what we've got. So I counted 15 seconds.
15, yeah.
And granted, you're not going to cut it at 15 right when he hikes it. But
Yeah.
your point is, go on with your point.
Yeah, so the whole thing is that, especially for the college coaches, is you have maybe, 20 to 30 seconds tops between your first 3 plays to catch their attention of, am I going to watch the rest of this film, or am I going to save it for later, or is this player maybe not good enough for my program, right? So if you're using that 15 seconds out of your 20 to 30 of just standing around before one play's even hiked, you're kind of limiting your exposure. You're limiting, the amount of plays that the coach is going to watch, because watching that, the coach might be like, well, if this is how long it takes for one play, how long is it going to take to watch just 3 plays of it, right? And then the second thing is, you don't know who you're supposed to watch. Out of the play, no one's highlighted, so you're just watching the play develop, and you're kind of trying to figure out, what is the player that I need to look for, because you don't see it on that film.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it like now, we're getting ready to start the second highlight. We're 34 seconds into it.
Yeah.
Now, if you can go back and let's say we look at this and we say, if I can get this thing out of here, but if you can move this to, let's say 12 seconds, right? Yep. So you're going to move this to 12 seconds here and then start. This is probably where it should start. Boom.
Yep.
Right there, maybe a little bit before. And what we're going to do, I know who this is. I mean, I know that I've seen this guy play. So I know he's a quarterback, right? So when I'm going, Huddle allows you to highlight this here in different ways so you know it, right? And you could have did it a couple seconds before. Or if he hikes it, you can then, boom, and this would be a case in which you've got someone right next to you. They don't know who you are. Now, they're going to know because they came into his Huddle profile. They see he's a quarterback. Okay, I get that. But still highlight your stuff, because I think that's important. And if you look at the overall down here at the bottom, it's 6 minutes and 9 seconds. Now, if I've got 100 players that I've got to watch, and Jordan, you brought this up too. I'll let you mention this. You're going to take 30 seconds per play, and I've got 6 minutes. I got to watch that, and I've got another 100 players. Then you got to add in what, Jordan, on Huddle?
The ads that are about 30 to 60 seconds each that you can't skip. So you're adding maybe half of the time you watch film in just ads. So you're extending the time you're watching the film and extending the time you have to wait to see each player's highlight. And if you're going to use all that much, you're going to use that much time to do so for a highlight that doesn't, have the player marked and is wasting the precious time of the highlight of, just waiting for the ball to be snapped. At least from my perspective and from I'd assume from a coach's perspective, you're kind of like, well, this might be, not to be rude, but kind of a waste of my time. Of I had to wait for the ad, and then I'm trying to figure out who the player is, but I have to wait an extra, 15, 20 seconds before the ball is even snapped just to watch one play.
Yeah, and this is the basics, right? And look, with all due respect, again, I don't know this player, but I know this player. I believe is a freshman, so I think I'm going to cut him a little slack.
Yeah.
And it's not, again, to make example. I'll reach out to this particular player and say, hey, here's what I think you should do, and then that's up to him. So he's doing the best with his knowledge. That's why we're having these discussions with folks, is so you don't run into these problems, and we can help this young man fix it, because he looks like he could potentially have a decent college or high school career and potentially go on to play in college. But again, I'm a coach. I sit down on whether it be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whatever day it may be, and I say, wow, I've just got my sheet and I've got 70 guys I got to look at. Now, I know they're not all quarterbacks, but let's say I've got 20 quarterbacks I got to look at. I'm looking 10. That's an hour of just looking at film, not counting the other half a minute to potentially a minute of huddle ads. So now I've got to add that on. So what am I at? An hour and 10 minutes. If I went boom, 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 not taking notes, not stopping as we're doing here. So let's make sure that we maximize the chances of coaches staying on our film. And we do that by respecting the coach's time and making sure that we shrink that down, go a couple seconds, 3 seconds maybe before the play starts, highlight yourself. And this is absolutely important. It's important for everybody. But remember, you're on the line. It's hard to see you. Sometimes it's best not to do a side line look. You want to have an end zone look if your school provides that, because sometimes they provide 2 different angles. And point to you, right? It's hard to get to you, especially if you're looking like this at a play from the sidelines and they're all lined up. They look like a bunch of big guys getting ready to knock heads. You have to pick that out. Now, as we go along in this, and I'm probably going to skip a little bit here so we don't waste a lot of time, we get in here and we see some plays. See, this is another thing where nobody wants to see the play developing. Nobody cares. Nobody's interested to see that the coach this thing where we got to look to the sidelines. Nobody cares about that. They care about that, right? And so not a bad play, right? Kid scores a touchdown. There are other plays as we get into this, and I don't know if I'm going to see them all, but there's some plays that we can get into that I think the kid can really highlight, and I'm going to try to pick that up somewhere. So that's not a play we definitely want in there, right? That's not a bad play. But there are some plays within the 6 minutes that the kid throws, a pretty long, decent touchdown and good response and things he does good as a quarterback. Here's one right here. Okay, so he catches it. Now I get it. The kid's out of bounds. I wouldn't highlight that because that could question my accuracy. But there are plays, and Jordan, talk a little bit about what's happening here with having plays like this. Forget the time length and stretching this out. Having plays that are good plays in the middle of your highlight tape.
Yeah, so it kind of just hurts your recruiting because you always want your best plays possible in the beginning of your film, right? And then as your film goes on, you try to always put your next best available plays after that, right? And then once it goes from being kind of your best plays possible, you might want to, if you have other plays that are good, put those in there. You have plays that you might have done something good, but it might not have, necessarily been a, big play. You can put that in there. But, putting in incomplete passes and things of that nature, I personally don't think that really benefits you because, like you said, it can come in a question of your accuracy, just things of that nature. So you don't want to put that on yourself because it'll end up being questioned, right? So the biggest thing is putting your best plays first. So then when a coach watches, that first 20 to 30 seconds of your film, of your best plays in the beginning, they're going to be intrigued and be like, I want to watch more of this film because you have piqued my interest. Right?
Now, and as you were talking about that, here's what's unique about this, and this is, I hope people are taking the time to watch this. I know it's going to be difficult to do this if you're listening to the podcast, so I would suggest, and I'll try if I can to break it down into the YouTube stuff where you can just skip through everything else if you want to get to this, and I'll that way it's kind of time stamped, so you don't have to go through everything and figure out what we're talking about. You can skip right to the huddle thing. But this is interesting, and this is where it's problematic. So I like this play, right? So I'm not talking about the time ahead, but boom, he's got a pass, nice crisp pass over the middle, great play, right? I think that should be included. I don't think that's his number one. Here's what I don't understand. The next play, he throws that.
Yeah.
Why are you showing that, right? That's not something we need to do. You need to do. And again, it doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback, but you don't need to show passes that you didn't complete, right? So I think it's important as we go along with this is that we make sure that, when you're looking at something, even your own highlight, what do you see is wrong? Too long setup here, right? So it's too long for each clip, right? Best plays, as we talked about, are hidden in this process. Don't put your best play 2 minutes in. And I'll try to show you one here in a little bit and tell you about it to show you the difference between the two. This is, it's too long of a highlight clip. With all due respect, the coaches won't take 6 minutes. I just don't think they're going to take that unless you're a super stud and he's got to watch it and make sure what's going on. It's 6 minutes and 9 seconds. It should be closer to 2 to 3 minutes. 3 minutes, in my opinion, at max, right? And you only include your great plays. That's what we're talking about. Don't include these other plays in which, hey, I threw it well, but that guy didn't catch it. That's not going to work. You can't push that off on something else because, in every relationship, no matter what is in life, but certainly applies in football. What role did you play as either a receiver or quarterback that play didn't occur? And everybody plays certain roles. If you play certain roles and both can share the success, you then have to share the issue of, the failures too, or the things that didn't quite happen. So, as we go through this, I think it's important that people know that they get to understand that. And we kind of get into what, when you're looking at that tape, you're getting into what do I have to do? And it's pretty simple, short, sweet, and the best, right? Now, don't get me wrong. You're not going to go to college just because you put in every touchdown you're thrown. That's not going to happen because eventually the college is going to say, let me see the full film on the guy. Right now they're getting down to brass tacks. They like Jordan. They want him. They've seen his highlights. Looks good. But did Jordan only make 6 or 7 good plays that game? And then the other thing that they're looking at, Jordan, and this, right? It's what we talked about last week. What's happening when things aren't going good? You're a quarterback, receiver, a lineman. You make a mistake. The coaches are going to watch that film and say, how did that receiver react? How did that quarterback? How did that lineman react when they maybe got an offsides penalty or whatever it is? When you throw that interception, when you drop that pass, defensive back misses that tackle, what is your response? If your response is going to be run off the sideline, throw your helmet down, or on the field start yelling at someone, or in particular, and I haven't seen this too much, but I'll tell you, I know it happens. You're going to then front off your coach and start yelling at your coach on the sidelines, either from the field or there. Look, I can tell you how quick that money can disappear. It's going to disappear really, really quick. So, hey, man, I appreciate you coming on, brother. I know you've got stuff to do. I've got stuff to do, but we'll get this up as soon as we can. I'm going to kind of tweak it a little bit in post-production, and I don't know if I can make me look any better looking. I don't think any hope for that, but I'm going to try it. But I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on as always.